Yeah, good morning. Jimmy Haniliak, Elder Advisor, Katakamut. Peter, I think it was. I just wanted to make sure about the dates of the migration and from the island to the mainland, and then from the mainland to the island of the DU. I just wanted to make sure because we never get any icebreakers in April, so I wanted to put it out that, okay, from end of October at least to end of December for the fall migration to the mainland. And between March to May, that is when they are going back to the island. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure about the dates.
Thanks, Jimmy. I guess I'll ask NPC staff, are there any concerns, questions that you have that haven't been adequately addressed, or some I guess can't be, but any lingering questions that, Peter?
Peter Schultz, Planning Commission. Regarding the Peary Caribou that we mostly finished yesterday, we have a polygon showing significant marine ice crossings for the Prince of Wales Somerset subgroup of Peary Caribou between those two islands. And that's all we have is that polygon. And we don't know the nature of the caribou crossings there, what sort of effects. It is on the main, is it on the Northwest Passage? We don't know if there's any marine shipping concerns that, et cetera. Is anyone knowledgeable about that particular group of Peary?
Has joined the conference.
Yep. GN can address that.
Morgan Anderson, GN. Historically, at least, that's been one of the larger populations of Peary caribou, although, as we've heard yesterday, they've kind of crashed in recent years. So how their migratory behaviors changed with the lower population is not clear at the moment, but historically, and probably what we'd be looking to preserve in the future for their movement corridors, would be that animals mostly move from Boothia and Somerset over towards northern Somerset and Prince of Wales in the spring, and then back in the fall. But then there's also some animals that would do kind of a reverse, or they'd go from Boothia straight to Prince of Wales, or they'd go from Prince of Wales over to Somerset. So they're not quite as defined in their movements as the Dolphin and Union caribou are, but they do use that ice crossing in the same kind of way. And perhaps some of the elders would be able to speak to that a little bit more, but that's kind of my impression of how they've been using the Peel Sound ice crossings, at least historically.
Please, go ahead.
Just a quick comment as somebody who's working on the recovery strategy with Morgan and CWS. It's a similar comment to last night, but the communities of Resolute Bay and Grise Fjord and the other communities who we worked with in developing that strategy did identify a significant amount of ice crossings in the high Arctic. I would imagine that when Jackie gets the information from that process, the community knowledge from that process, as well as asks the communities of Greece and Res and others about those crossings, they'll gather quite a lot of information about those high Arctic crossings. Thank you.
Bruno Cruffy in our North Lave GNBT. Where are we going from now? If someone could clarify the stepwise process to the end point. You got this workshop here, and then I understand there's a hearing in the fall. What's happening in the middle, and then after? Please, thank you.
The timeline was tentatively for the November public hearing, as outlined up on the screen. And we've been working with our planning partners, mainly Government of Canada, MTI, and GN, to refine our timelines and add some extra consultation steps. And the commission is bringing this forward. Now it's contingent on, one, the commissioners approving the revised timeline, and two, that supplementary funding for the additional consultation and the public hearing is given to the commission. And I will say that working collectively and having the partners working together, I think that we've come to a good point of consensus of where we're at. And over the course of the next couple weeks, I think the planning partners are taking it back internally to their organizations to look at the revised timeline, and the commissioners will be looking at it the week of March 21st. And then, again, our funding is the implementation branch, so the commission requires the extra additional funding for additional consultation processes. Peter, do you have the other amended document with the timeline? So, and we need to tweak this, of course. The commission's open to working with the planning partners to make sure that we have incorporated the extra consultative steps that NTI has requested. And Brian's just pulling it up for me. So the timeline would look like NTI has asked for an extension of comments on the redraft to May 31st. We've asked them to give it to us by May 16th, and all other parties. Then the commission is committed to, now this is pending commissioner approval. This is not staff's decision. This is the commission's decision. This is what we're putting in front of them. June 20th will be the release of the redraft, with all of the information included. And we will post the translated version of the updated draft Nunavut Land Use Plan by July 25th. Participants, August 15th, participants submit any expert reports to put on before the commissioners in the public hearing. August 29 to 31st is the in-person pre-hearing conference. So this will be finalizing the witnesses, any motions by participants, and the procedures for the public hearing. In September, participants submit any I've only had half a cup of coffee this morning. I need a couple more. So participants submit any expert reports responding to the August 15th reports. And then we've been requested to consider additional consultation, and the commission has looked at this, and we are putting in a funding submission. And this will be consultation to inform communities on the redraft, the updated redraft, so they're informed on that. And we've asked our planning partners if there's any other outcomes that they would like to see as a result of the additional consultations. For the commission, our duty to consult, we have to consult with all parties who have equal standing. Sorry, Tommy, I know I'm going too fast. So we would do 6 regional consultations using the same methodology of SNURB, bringing 5 people from each community into central location in Kitikmeot, central location in Kavalik, 1 in Baffin North, 1 in Baffin South, Makivik, and then we have the Athabasca Dene and Dene Southlane that we would also do consultation with. And then after that, we would do the second pre-hearing conference in January, and the final public hearing to initiate in March and continuing into April. So that's the revised timeline, again, pending supplementary funding and commission approval It's not within, as I said earlier, I can't stress that enough, it's not within staff authority to change the November timeline. But we are listening to our planning partners. We do want to have a cohesive public hearing, that all parties are comfortable with the process leading up to it. Also, as executive director, I've been directed to ensure that the plan that does go forward is a plan that's going to get approved, not just a plan that's going to be approved by the parties. So that direction to staff is to ensure that we're working with the partners proactively. I can say that we're listening and doing the best we can. I know we're not going to please everyone 100%, but we're working very diligently to ensure that concerns are being addressed and that everyone is being included in the consultation process leading up to the public hearing. So these may tweak a little bit, as I said. Each of the parties have to go back and look at their internal processes and see what their respective bodies want. So this will be what we're looking at for the timeline. And I think if all parties are in agreement, we've asked participation in the consultation from the parties and a sign-off on the timeline collectively. I think we'll be more successful at achieving a supplementary request from Canada. And they haven't committed to giving it to us. They've committed to reviewing it, which is a first. And we're very pleased that our relationship with Canada has improved significantly. And as I say, with our technical partners, the technical sessions, the participation has been wonderful. And I thank everyone in the room and around the table for your commitment to this file, because it's been a very interesting long haul, and I do see the light that this hearing is going to happen and that the first ever Nunavut land use plan will come through and be a reality. And as the staff work, I recognize the commission team were very small. They work very hard and they're very committed to the file, and I commend them for their hard work and their diligence, because this is our team. We have our finance back in the office, but this is our team, and we're hoping that we get more members on our team so we can work better and have more fulsome relationships and more communications. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be more than willing to answer on the timelines, and Brian, John, Peter will assist if they're technical in nature. Thank you.
Peter, can you scroll up a bit so we see the more immediate? Yeah. So for the immediate term, obviously the marine session has been rescheduled. There's some question still about the written comment deadline. Is that still either the 16th or end of May?
Thank you, David. Hannah and I are working on that, and we can have, as soon as NTI can provide us back an answer on that, we can make that definitive. We need the 16th versus the 31st to make the timelines for all our procedural notice and timeline to get to make the deadline for March, April. That's pretty important to our funders as well, that we have identification in this fiscal year of the projects, and starting in March carrying forward to April meets their needs, and it also meets the partners' needs to give a couple more months and add the other next layer of consultation that partners are more comfortable with.
Okay, so I guess the immediate answer to your question, Bruno, is written comments on the current draft, and I would recommend targeting mid-May to get those in, even if you get a couple weeks of relief on that. And then the rest of it, likely, based on what Sharon has outlined, probably won't change a whole lot, assuming that the funding is provided. Yep, sure.
So this is the proposed timeline going forward to the commissioners at this upcoming meeting. And until they approve this, it's the other timeline that's still in place. But the meeting is in 2 weeks, so we'll have confirmation on that, of this timeline, if they approve it. Thank you.
Ken?
Ken Landa, Government of Canada. So as we know, the Marine Workshop hasn't happened as was anticipated when these dates were put together. And I'm not sure what information is yet been sort of worked through on when the Marine session might happen. Depending on when that is, then there might be a need for some variation, maybe a little, maybe a lot, to what we're seeing here. So is it possible to get a sense of what the tentative thinking is so we can start projecting and work planning around that?
Sharon?
Thank you, David. Sharon from the Commission. We'll work with Canada to get that session scheduled as quickly as possible, hopefully in the next couple weeks. And the Commission's flexible if it's conducive, because everyone was going to join by teleconference for this. If Ottawa works better and it's more cost-effective, we're prepared to hold it in Ottawa if it's easier for the parties. So Ken, I'll work with Spencer to pin down the date, and we know we need to do that very quickly. Thank you, Mr. David.
Thanks, Sharon. Any other questions on tentative timeline? I hope this is the final timeline, personally. The public hearing I keep thinking it's going to happen sooner, and then it gets delayed, so I think for everybody's peace of mind, it would be nice to nail this down, and I recognize that there are other factors engaged, but Ken?
Ken Landa, Government of Canada. This is less a question about the timeline, but more about trying to understand better what one of these steps is about. The slide that we're looking at draws a distinction between written submissions on the one hand and expert reports on the other. Much of, but not all of the content that comes in our written submissions is supported by expert support within our institutions, but it's not done in that formalized approach of putting the person's qualifications forward and subjecting them to cross-examination on their qualifications, et cetera. I'm wondering if the Commission could give us a sense of what they are anticipating and what would be useful, and does the Commission want us to move to a more formal approach of identifying the expert and the expertise and isolating that from other parts of our submissions, and if so, what might the implications of that be?
Sure.
Thank you, David. Sharon from the Commission. Ken, I'm going to let lawyer to lawyer have this conversation, so we'll ask Alan to respond to it. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Alan, legal counsel to the Commission. I always let Ken throw the first punch, and he usually holds back, so I never reply. Great question, Ken. When you look at the list, it's clear to us, at least, that the written comments are meant to be a fulsome thought process that you have on all of the issues that you've seen in these discussions and the draft plans. We know that in addition to your written policy positions and thoughts generally, there may be the need for particular expertise, and so we've separated that out to follow the posting of the draft plan, which might tweak additional thoughts when you see that, and then a chance for reply to expert reports with expert reports. Or as John Savoy sometimes says, comments on comments on comments. All of this leading up to a full sense of what the participants wish to say, both at a general policy level and at an expert witness level, leading up to the public hearing. So it was considered a useful step to have the expert report come after the posting of the 2016 draft land use plan, once people see that next red line version. So I hope that addresses your question, Ken. And I will say, there have been 2 timelines, and this is the one with the hearing next year, which is dependent upon the additional funding to specifically accommodate the requested regional sessions in October and November, as you see on that screen. But unless that happens, it's the first timeline, which perhaps Peter can put up again, which has a public hearing this November. That's the current deadline. This is the consultation inclusive deadline. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Ken, anything?
That's very helpful. Ken Landa, Government of Canada. Alan, that's helpful. It raises for me some questions about whether it might make sense to have an early identification of whether people are intending to file a specific expert report on a topic so that people know it's coming, or if there is a topic that somebody thinks it would be useful to have an expert report on, and maybe it's the commission that would find it useful to have an expert report produced, but that institution or person doesn't themselves think that they're the appropriate commissioner, wrong word, appropriate person to seek out the report. A discussion of that earlier rather than later would be helpful, because those things do take a long time to put together. So what I'm getting at is if there are certain kinds of information or submission that would be given less weight absent an expert report, but an expert report might have them considered in a more productive way, knowing that that's somebody's perspective on that issue early would be helpful.
Alan?
Thank you for the question, Ken. The 2 places on the timeline that's on the screen that could accommodate those 2 parts of your question, I think would be what's presently up there is May 30th. Certainly in addition to submitting responses to comments, parties could also say, we intend to file an expert report on sea ice crossings, pick a topic. And that could give everybody an idea that somebody around the table is producing something. You wouldn't necessarily see that report until later in the timeline. And likewise, it would seem to me that on the June 20th date on this timeline, where the commission staff would be releasing the refined draft plan, it just changed on me. And the options and recommendations document. At that moment, on June 20th, the staff would then have released its plan, its options and recommendations document. It would have had written comments and replies, and perhaps notification of intent to file. The staff at that point might then also be able to determine that additional expert reports could be sought by participants. Indeed, as you know, it's possible for the commission to have expert reports produced for itself. We've made a conscious effort to seek expert reports from the participants rather than an expert report that comes directly to the commissioners. As some of you will know, that can have the effect of giving the impression that the expert that reported directly to the commissioner has more weight than some other expert. So on a given topic, we would welcome an expert report from any of you as preferable to a direct expert report. And that's just a question of the perception. The expert advice shouldn't be different no matter who requests it, but it has the perception of being perhaps more neutral if the commission themselves haven't commissioned it. So again, thanks for those 2 questions. And on the fly, Peter's just modified it, and I think that addresses your concern. Ken? Thank you.
I think that's extremely helpful. One thing I want to say explicitly, when I'm using the term expert report, I'm including Inuit Kaitai. Oh my goodness.
Do you want my card?
Mami anak. Yes. Kapi tarumayunga. IQ. I'm not going to trip on it again. I am including gathering together into a focused piece, relevant IQ. So I wanted to be clear that I wasn't excluding other important forms of knowledge. I think there will be some challenges with the timing available between identifying that an expert report is required, procuring one if we need to go outside through contracting. Those timelines would be impossible. If we have internal experts within the Government of Canada, they would be challenging depending on the availability of the expert. I suggest we not try and fix all these issues today with timing, but I do want to point out that will be a challenging piece of the puzzle for us.
Alan?
Thank you, Alan, for the commission. Of course, these topics have all been studied for years, and please don't wait for us to ask you to consider an expert report. You must surely have heard the dialogue around the table, and if any of you think you need an expert report to buttress any of your individual policy positions, by all means, I'm sure you've notified those experts years ago. We're merely letting you know when the deadline is. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just, before I go to Mike, encourage that approach. From my perspective, every time I turn around, somebody's saying, well, I need more time to do this or that. You've had lots of time. It's time to get this done, past time. Mike?
Mike Setterington with the Chamber of Mines. It seems a bit like we're making this process up on the fly, specifically around submitting reports. And I like the deadlines up there. May 16th, participants submit written comments. It seemed like May 30th actually obligated the participants to respond to written comments, similar to a process like the Nunavut Impact Review Board process. So if that was the case, we probably would have resubmitted our technical report on May 16th so we could get a specific response by May 30th. But now it seems like we're notifying again that we're going to submit an expert report on May 30th, but I don't see where an obligation to respond comes in, similar again to what we see in the Nunavut Impact Review Board process, which is effective for getting responses to an expert report with technical issues and questions. And it's not just our party, it might be any parties around here that would have questions to the other party. Where are you obligated to respond in writing?
Thanks, Mike. September 12th looks like the response date for people to respond to any other expert reports that have been, unless I'm misreading that. I mean, you can, again, this is new to me too, but I think you can submit an expert report at any time. As Alan and Sharon have emphasized, sooner the better. But it looks like September 12th is the date to respond to any expert reports that have been submitted prior to that time. Am I misreading that?
No, you aren't misreading it, I just didn't read it. So.
More coffee for everyone. Sure.
Thank you, Sharon, from the Commission. I can assure you this is not on the fly. We have worked really hard to work with the planning partners to ensure that everybody is on the same page and that where we can, we've been flexible to revise the timelines. And I can tell you every time that the Commission has to revise these timelines, it's very devastating to the team who this is their file. They eat, live, breathe 10, 15 hours a day trying to move this forward. So we are working very hard to hear all of your concerns, incorporate them into the process, and get this public hearing done. And the commissioners, honestly, I am going to present a very strong case to change the timeline. I have had the initial discussions with the chair, and the concern about moving the hearing to March, April. When we did our consultations a couple years ago, the community said, don't come in spring. We want to see you when our hunters are in the community, hence the November date was decided because that's what communities told us. Now, we're going to be telling the communities that if it's approved that we're making a change, and that's a balancing act for the commission because we need to listen to the communities just as much as we're listening to the parties around the table, and we want to ensure maximum participation from everyone and that everyone's voice is heard, that the elders, the HTOs, the DIOs, that the communities have the right people at the table so their voice is heard, and that the commissioners have all information in front of them to weigh to make the final decisions for the land use plan. So that's a compromise, and that's one that we, if it is approved, are going to have to go back to the communities and talk to them about the change and work with NAM and all the other organizations to make sure that the communities are as prepared. And we've committed that to NAM, that our staff will work with communities so that the 5 individuals that are picked from the community are prepared to, they're not just walking into an unknown process. We have to work with them too. So that's a change. And I can tell you, we're working really hard to listen to everybody. So thank you.
Okay, in the interest of time, Alan, a quick one.
Thank you, David. Alan, with the commission. Just very briefly, to the point, Mike, about revising it on the fly, I don't actually think that's a bad idea. I mean, I think that demonstrates that the commission is receptive to good ideas, and we put a couple of Ken Landa ideas up there. We could probably put his initials, if you like, next to them. And I would say that the commission, they're going up now. With respect to changes to the timeline, the commission's open to discussions, whether they're from Ken in person on Saturday Night Live or whether they're via communication. And the best example of that is the regional community representative sessions in October and November. That addition is a direct result of our last discussions in Rankin, where we heard you all, and then there were sidebar conversations, which has led to the suggestion that it's a good idea and we'll incorporate it. So I hope we can continue to be fair and responsive and make those suggestions on the fly. And now, because David has his finger twitching on my mic, one last point. The August 29-31 in-person pre-hearing conference, read those first 2 words really carefully, in person. We've tried to be very accommodating to people calling in on technical matters. We understand not everybody can be here. But an in-person pre-hearing conference is for people to get their head around process. How will we use those very valuable 10 days when we have a public hearing? How will we organize it? That's a roundtable discussion. And my strong advice to the commission, which they're always free to ignore, is that it should be an in-person session. People might yield and allow for a telephone line, but I will be stressing again that
You've stressed it enough, and the commission has responded in sufficient detail, I think, to the concerns that have been raised. Hannah.
Good. Hannah O'Neill-Sadler, NTI. Thank you, Sharon, for putting this proposed revised timeline and process up on the screen for us, because we hadn't had a response to our February letter. We appreciate the addition of the regional community representative sessions, the consultations. I could just imagine at the community level how complex this might look, the draft Nunavut land use plan as it is for us, so that's great. What I committed to sharing yesterday is that I'll take this request to our powers that be, and we'll respond in short order. And just a quick note, we're all Canadians, Canada, Government of Canada. Thank you.
All right. Any other, Bruno, you had no idea the extent of the answer that you were going to get, did you? Yeah, it's always reassuring. All right. I think we can move on from the timeline discussion. All right.
He hates when I do this, but I just want to know, does anybody have any issues with what we were proposing, or do you have any suggestions? Like, tell us now, because as we move forward, if we're going to the parties with this, we're going to be asking for commitment. Thank you.
Warren.
Thank you very much, Warren, for the KWB. The process looks great. I just want to very quickly note on the record that I'm not sure the KWB is going to have adequate funding to properly participate in all this. The way that we'd budgeted for was the original timeline where we would have had a final hearing this past November, and I just don't know where this money's going to come from. So I hope some other organizations might be able to help us find money to travel for these things. We have the staff, but the travel costs for this are huge, and I have no idea how we're going to make ends meet.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's not exclusive to your organization, but we're not going to solve that problem here either. I'm going to call it on the timeline stuff. If there are discussions, you can have them with Sharon and the Planning Commission and the other parties. But let's get back to lingering issues and concerns. Warren, no? Mike, you had a...
Mike Setterington with the Chamber of Mines. And I think it might be a good way to round off a lot of the Caribou discussion. The discussion has been focused certainly on the planning process and the protection of habitat. But I think the protection of habitat should be put in the perspective of broader caribou management, and I think that would inform the planning process. And in our technical review, and then comments that Jimmy has also brought up several times when he's come up to talk as well too, it's the matter of the key issues about limiting and regulating factors of caribou populations, and that's limits on mortality. And Jimmy was focused on the predation of the grizzly bears and the wolves and what's happening in these calving grounds and elsewhere. And that was a question that we brought up as well too, that there are tools for controlling mortality, and are those tools being considered in tandem with habitat protection as well? So I guess my question to the GN, the Management Authority, or to the NWMB is, what are the other tools that are being considered for caribou management beyond just the habitat protection that we've been discussing for the past 2.5 days?
Mitch?
Yeah, thank you, Mitch Campbell, GN. We have always acknowledged in all our reports that there are, and it's, I think, obvious to all the folks around the table have spent a lot of time with caribou and understand the basic biology of the species and behaviors, that there are a number of environmental mechanisms that impact caribou and impact their abundance. The GN has been discussing, but not to a point of conclusion, a number of different mechanisms that we might be able to influence. And I stress not to conclusion. There are differences across the range. Predators are one of those things that are not a consistent component in terms of abundance on calving grounds, although we acknowledge on some herds that this is an issue that's being discussed. Just a quick example for the Beverly and Camanariac populations. We have conducted reconnaissance work outside of and inside of calving areas over the last few decades, and have recently looked in these herds on predator abundance in core calving areas, and have found that for these populations that predator abundance in the core calving area for Camanariac was less than 1%. However, just outside of those calving areas, in post-calving areas, in the southern reaches of the post-calving areas, and along the spring migratory corridors following calving, that these densities increase substantially. And we had similar findings for both the Beverly and the Camanariac. And we also acknowledge, and I know Northwest Territories has been working on this as well, that this is not necessarily consistent, but certainly is what we found, and we have good quantitative data to back that up for both the Beverly and the Camanariac. So it is something that we are monitoring, but something that is not consistent across the herds. And there has been a call from my regional communities, the Quebec region, for more research into predators to understand what's going on these, with these herds. And just for the information here, the GN did submit proposals for research on predators over the last 2 years. However, resources were not sufficient to fund these programs, and they fell further down in the overall priority list from a GN standpoint, so they weren't funded. And we will keep submitting these proposals because we know they're important. So that's a brief overview of that situation and the fact that the GN is in fact looking into it and has been working on that. And we do have some preliminary findings, as I just outlined. But it always comes back to all these mechanisms that impact caribou are cumulative. We are aware that they all have impacts on abundance and distribution, and that includes activities, anthropogenic or man-caused activities and disturbance. They all play a role in impacting caribou abundance overall. The only activities we have ultimate control over are those caused by man, and that's what it comes down to. So in this suite of potential negative impacts to abundance, we have solid information, and we know that we can reduce the overall impacts by protecting caribou in appropriate ways within their annual range, with an understanding that there has been wide support, scientific information, IQ, and subject matter expert experience combined to suggest that calving grounds are the most sensitive of these seasonal ranges to these kinds of activities. I hope that helps flesh it out. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Carla, did you want to add anything?
Carla Leto with the Nunavut Wildlife Management Board. I think Mitch covered most of it there. It's in terms of other tools or things that are being used. It's the government of Nunavut and NWMB and other partners. We are using other ways of managing the herds at this time, especially with the low populations. So as a lot of people know, there are THs in place for some herds. There are other herds that we have TH requests in, and the board is looking at public hearings for some of those. So we're not just solely looking at habitat protection, we're also looking at managing harvest with non-quota limitations and quotas there. There's also management plans being developed for several herds with other jurisdictions. And we have heard as well the predators, and the GN has told us they're looking at some of those options as well. So it's not just solely focusing on the habitat protection, we are looking at other ways to manage the herds as well. Thank you.
Peter Schultz, NPC. Staff have been looking to just mention one potential way the plan can be used that hasn't been discussed too much, and this is as good as time as any, I think. Under NUPA Section 68, it binds the authorizing agencies to do what is said that they will do in the plan. That provides the opportunity to use the plan as a piggybacking opportunity for those agencies to agree to do certain things that may not necessarily involve the day-to-day activities of the commission after the plan is accepted. Those could be things like research priorities, strategic environmental assessments, coordination of other activities. 2 more seconds. By doing this, the needs of those projects, such as consultations, informing cabinet, developing MOUs, are sort of negated, and they're sort of just, as I said, piggybacked onto the planning process. So it's one way of leveraging Section 68 of NUPA that may be applicable to some of the discussion that's coming up. Thank you.
You were going to write, there was going to be a written proposal or something about regarding Caribou. I would like to say, there'll be a meeting in Nunavut, and there has been understanding, and there have been negotiations on between the white people and the Inuit, and how the things should be. Right now, the meeting that is coming, this is what I would like to see, the planning. If they can make a written submission or a written, they should be translated, and they should be sent out ahead of time before the public hearing. Both written in Inuktitut and English, so any language that is used, please send them to each organizations or to HTOs or whatever. They need to be written in both English and Inuktitut, and let them understand this is important because for the upcoming public hearing. I would want to see it, and I would want to see all the HTOs receive all the information that are going to be used in public hearing. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Jackie.
Thank you, Jackie Price, Kikitalik Wildlife Board. Just a quick comment. As our organization was heavily involved in the discussion on the moratorium and the establishment of a TAH for Baffin Island caribou. At the public hearing, there was discussion about predators and wolves, but largely there was frustration coming from the communities on how we were discussing human impacts on the population. Many of the communities pointed out that harvesting impacts compared to impacts due to exploration and development was grossly uneven. And there was a consistent call by the hunters in this region to stop focusing on managing how much people hunted and to explore larger habitat considerations. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Bruno?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bruno Croft, GNWT. That was a good question, Mike. Well, we're doing on our side of the border, of course. Everybody know that we have TH in place, more to come, which is the very reason why we're going to those public hearings. We also have a community-based wolf harvesting program in place that we've modified this year. And we also committed to do a full review or feasibility assessment going through the entire suite of predator removal program that had taken place in other jurisdictions over the years. We have a year to produce this. It's also part of our joint proposals and the consultation we're going through. And then our Aboriginal groups, co-management boards, and our respective governments will go through this and make a decision if they want to go further. There are things we cannot avoid anymore. If you go to the people in the communities and tell them you can't harvest anymore and then take away their way of life, you better listen to the other things that they are telling you. So predator removal is on the list. Protection of the camping grounds is also on the list. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, Luigi Toretti, Kitikmeot Inuit Association. One question. There's a clarification request. There will be a roundtable. Is that correct?
Roundtable of concluding remarks, yes. Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I realize that this discussion is difficult in the context of the land use plan because it's difficult to put polygons around this particular discussion. But I am tired. I am tired, and I am extremely pleased to see. I am tired because the Kitikmeot has brought this up to government for a long, long time. Inuit have expressed that frustration, similar to other regions, that predators are an issue and they need to be addressed. Instead of research, fund the hunters because they will do an effective job of removing the predators. So I thank you for the example of what's going on in the NWT. I apologize for the frustration I'm expressing, but it has been a long time that this discussion and this presentation has been given to the GN by the KIA and by others in the Kitikmeot, and thank you for that leadership at the GNWT. I hope that is followed by the GN. Taima.
Thanks, Luigi. If you've got any strong feelings about it, don't hold back. Mitch?
Italian nature.
Yeah, Mitch Campbell, Government of Nunavut. Obviously, a point of clarification here. The GN has not rejected anything. The GN is trying to move forward with the funds that it has and the capacity that it has. And the GN is working with the GNWT as well through various processes and are involved in the predator discussions, myself included. So we are engaged. There's certain limitations to what we can and can't engage in with the suite of priorities that we have in this territory. I won't get into that issue. However, there is always, and this is a great point of clarification here, there is always differences of opinion across this territory. And we cannot take issues that are close to our hearts, that are very regionalized or localized, and apply them across to every HTO and every RWO. Predators are being discussed, and we are engaged in our own region with discussion of predators and their impacts on caribou and what we might be able to do about it. To suggest that the GN is doing nothing is simply wrong. We are not doing nothing. We are engaging and we are following and putting forward research proposals consistent with what our HTOs are asking us to do to try and flesh out some of these issues. So that's a perspective from the Kivalliq Regional Wildlife Biologist.
Mr. Chairman, Jimmy Haniliak, I'm speaking for myself and my community. I am on my 6th year with the Elder Advisory Committee, and from year one, I've been fighting for this. Seems to me every time I talk about predators to our GN staff, I'm sorry, but it goes here and it comes out. It flies around. What will it take, to go ahead? Will it take a human life to do something? Is that what you're waiting for? I've been fighting about predation for many years. And our population in Victoria Island has so grown, and they are coming into the community at nighttime, and the security guards for any building, they have seen us. Will it take a human life for the GN to do something? Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy. I'm going to conclude this, but I got to say, it is not a simple issue, and people know that. I sat through several caribou workshops while I chaired them in Yellowknife, and I heard every side of that argument time and time again, from First Nations, from everybody sitting around the table. There, even within communities, are very different views on dealing with predators. I think one needs to be a little bit fairer on this question. It's not an easy one, and particularly when you're sitting in a government seat, not an easy one to address. Maybe simple from the perspective of those who are on the land and seeing the issues, but it's, in the bigger picture, it's not a simple thing. So I appreciate the emotion and the concerns, and I appreciate the work that's being done. But I got to say, it's a complicated. We all know it's complicated, and there's no simple solution.
Spencer Doerr, INAC, thank you. Post second technical meeting, we put forth a discussion paper on existing rights in an effort to spell out our perspective on existing rights. I just wanted to clarify on the record that it was not our intention to provide the definitive. It wasn't to be the last word. We're certainly open to discussing and revisiting it in order to find the appropriate treatment of existing rights and grandfathering in the draft Nunavut land use plan. As part of that preliminary exercise, we've identified a need to establish a baseline understanding of NUPA amongst the parties. So, that work is underway. It's our intention to do this work within the land use planning process. We believe the new draft process is probably more conducive to success. Thank you.
Any questions or observations? Hannah and Leslie?
Hannah O'Neill, Sagar NTI. Thank you, Spencer. Spencer brings up a very interesting point, and when we're discussing existing rights, NTI is exploring all legally viable options before we bring forth any policy recommendations to our leadership. And we've been looking at existing rights in many different lenses under the context of NUPA. And one thing we've noticed is that perhaps we haven't done a very good job explaining what NUPA is, how it applies to the land use planning context, how it applies to regulators and to the Inuit organizations. But needless to say, we've been engaged on this topic internally, NTI, and within the regional Inuit associations, as well as with the Government of Canada. And not just under the lens of exploration and major projects, but also under the lens of outfitters and hunting rights and et cetera. But thank you, Spencer, for clarifying that it's not a fait accompli for the Government of Canada's discussion paper, and we look forward to expanding our conversations.
Hi, Leslie Wakeland, Beverly Communariat Caribou Management Board. Thanks for the clarification and update. I spoke quite a bit on this at the last meeting, so I don't want to go through all the points I made, but I would like to repeat just a couple because there's a lot of people here in the room that weren't here before. The Caribou Management Board was trying to track mineral tenures on calving grounds for a number of years and put together maps and brought them to each board meeting for people to see what was going on. And it was clear there was a lot going on and there was a lot of changes. And the board was, became concerned about existing rights on the calving grounds for mineral development. So one of the things we did is we talked to someone in the Government of Canada about it and got more support to actually be producing these maps. But in the process, what was explained to us by, I guess it was INAC at that time, representative, was their interpretation was that mineral tenures provide access to defined parcels of land for a specific time period and a specific use, meaning mineral exploration, but they don't provide rights for mine development. And so the board proceeded under this understanding. And our interpretation, or our understanding is that other people's interpretation is that other people are interpreting mineral tenures to mean that anything from a prospecting permit or a mineral claim on up, I guess, is a mineral lease. All those tenures are interpreted to give the right to proceed to mine development, and that is our main issue. So we think there's clarification or information specifically needed, for sure. And So one of the terminology questions that we submitted last week when we thought the deadline for comments, I just have to put that in, was last week. We said basically at what point in time and for what duration are rights considered to be existing. So our view is that existing means at the present time in the rights a party has now, and that the duration of those rights would be the time period designated by the type of rights. So for instance, for prospecting permits, that would be 3 or 5 years, depending on where they are issued. So we'd like that clarified. And then also, of course, the concern is at what point in time these tenures would be considered existing in terms of the land use plan. So would that be today? Would that be when the plan is finalized and goes to the signatories, or would it be when the plan is actually signed and approved, or some other time? So we would appreciate that kind of thing being clarified. And then the other main point that we would like to see is, are there other options besides a blanket approach being put in place where everything everywhere gets treated the same way? Because our understanding is that in some cases, when companies are at the very beginning of their projects, it may be a possible choice for them to be compensated, and either in financial ways or in, it's been called a land swap, so they would explore in a different location if they, would agree. Obviously, it would have to be negotiated. So that was one of our points that we raised, and we appreciate other creative approaches being looked into, and the possibility that it doesn't have to be just one size fits all everywhere all the time. So, thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. And I assume, Spencer, that those are considerations you're taking into account?
Spencer Duranek. Yeah, and that, it is about hearing everyone's perspective so that we can take them in and revisit what we've put down on paper. I would like to make one sort of clarification, and maybe the terminology was used. The subsurface rights that are issued, there's little discretion. It's a free entry system, so they're issued if they're issued in accordance with the mining regulations. I think what was trying to be conveyed for past INAC officials was that in order to do work on the surface, the access, there's a different process, which is there is more discretion, and it follows the process outlined under now NUPA and the NLCA.
All right, that discussion can take place at a later date. Warren, quickly, and then we'll have a break.
Thanks, David. I'll try and go through this as quickly as I can.
Warren, just maybe to facilitate this, if you've raised the issue before, I don't think we need to talk about it again just now. Just a heads up on that.
Okay, thanks. I'll just go through it point by point then very briefly. The KWB thinks that NUPA does not imply that existing rights can be upgraded. NUPA is the standard and was developed through consultation. And going beyond it, we feel flies in the face of these consultations and is of questionable legality, since there is a duty to consult on policies that affect Aboriginal and treaty rights. There's some issues with consultations when existing rights were issued. As Melanie pointed out yesterday, Type A land use permits don't go through NERB. NERB screenings are the first time hunters and other beneficiaries are informed about land use permits being issued. And the only way they really have a say in the issuance of these other lower level permits is through the planning process. And as plans haven't been updated regularly, I think it's not clear that the duty to consult on issuing many of these rights have been met. And third, we want to suggest that industry was well aware that they were making uncertain investments when they applied for rights to explore in the calving grounds in particular, particularly for the projects that have gone through NERB screenings. Because the NERB screening reports and submissions by the GN, the BQCMB, a number of HTOs, the GNWT, and numerous Dene and Métis communities notified the proponents that these areas are contentious and that communities were fighting to have them protected, and government was, and a lot of people were seeking to protect them under this land use planning process. So in our opinion, it's not clear that it's necessary to grandfather all rights, particularly in calving grounds. And we believe that the government could reasonably expropriate some of these rights, or at the very least, impose an indefinite moratorium on the exercise of rights within calving grounds. Thank you.
Ken Landa, Government of Canada. Before we broke, Warren raised some concerns, some questions, and made some statements about issues around existing rights, and we understand entirely why it was important to get those on the record. Didn't want to let them pass unacknowledged, because it's not respectful to let them pass unacknowledged, but we're sort of looking for enough room to go away from this table, understanding that more work does need to be done on these issues, and some of the things that you've raised we might not think are fully accurate from our perspective, but that doesn't undermine the main point, which is that this is a crucial issue that deserves careful thinking with considerations like that taken into account. So I don't think we can't have the substantive discussion today, but didn't want to leave your comments unacknowledged.
And I guess it does beg one question about the three main parties getting together and perhaps sorting this out. But Brandon, go ahead.
Brandon LaForest, World Wildlife Fund Canada. Want to thank Spencer for his clarification that they're open to exploring different options, and that the clarification paper was just a starting point of conversation. But I want to raise that the longer we wait on imposing a potential moratorium on permits on calving grounds or other sensitive areas, the more we handcuff ourselves in dealing with those issues. So the longer it's still available for people to apply for permits, the potential raises of more permits being in. And then if we look at compensation, it becomes harder. If we look at land swap, it becomes harder. The liability of the government could go up if we do get to a compensation model and the permits have increased and the number has increased. So just a push from us to consider a moratorium, especially on calving grounds, as we move forward considering other options. Thanks.
Thanks, Brandon. Bruno.
Quick comment. I don't want to stir the pot there, Mr. Chair. Bruno, GNWT. Ken, have we ever considered a grandfather calving ground? And the people that rely on them, after all, they were there way before everything else. Just a thought. You don't have to comment on that.
I think I will comment and say that that's a key perspective that does need to be taken into account.
Thank you, Sharon, from the Commission. From the Commission, we would ask the parties if you could have a fulsome discussion on existing rights so you could come to some sort of consensus prior to coming to us with all the different divergent views for the hearing. If you can find some consensus, it would make the Commissioner's job much easier than having to weigh all the different positions, if that is at all possible. Thank you.
Hannah?
Thank you, Hannah O'Neill-Sager, NTI. As I had mentioned earlier, NTI has been engaging in conversations with the Government of Canada and our other partners to try and maximize areas of agreement. That's not guaranteeing that we'll agree on everything, but we are and have been engaged in these conversations and will continue to do so.
All right, then I'm going to propose we start with the concluding wrap-up remarks.
Mike Setterington with the Chamber of Mines. So the Chamber of Mines believes that exploration and mining can coexist with caribou recovery efforts in Nunavut. We work in a country, and particularly in Nunavut, with some of the strongest and most transparent environmental protection policies in the world. As I said at the start of this meeting, the Chamber's position is to keep opportunities for new and advancing discoveries open for the benefit of the proponent and associated benefits to Nunavut and the Nunavut and Canadian economy. The Chamber is particularly interested in working in Nunavut with clear rules, and we think that this planning process will help clarify those rules. So that's all we're looking for. Tell us where we can work. Proponents come in asking for permission to harvest resources. We know we have to work through and get the social license in order to get those rights to extract the resources. We just need to know what those rules are and not see it towards the end of a process at a final public hearing. So if a proponent has gone through and gained the social license, it can't be stopped by a final hearing stage. So it has to start with a clear planning process that we've been talking about. So again, it is up to Nunavut to decide how to balance multiple objectives and considering the possibilities and opportunities provided by the Nunavut Chamber of Mines and Mining and Exploration. The Chamber is here to help to make informed and sound management decisions. So our expectations to the regulators are also to provide sound and informed regulatory advice. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Warren, for the Kivalliq Wildlife Board. I guess in conclusion of this whole meeting, I'd just like to reiterate that with regards to calving and post-calving grounds on the mainland, the Kivalliq Wildlife Board favors the prohibition of mining, exploration, infrastructure, and the other prohibitions that were on the list. With regards to the island herds in the Kivalliq region, the KWB will work with the Coral Harbor HTO to provide clearer recommendations for these herds to the Planning Commission before the May deadline for comments. With regards to water crossings, the Kivalliq Wildlife Board executive and staff have discussed the Kivalliq Inuit Association's proposal for water crossing protection and have determined that it is insufficient and mining, exploration, and infrastructure needs to be prohibited within 10 kilometers of the crossings, as we expressed in our submission for this meeting and in our presentation. With regards to access to Inuit-owned lands, we hope that further clarity of plan reviews with specific regards to how the caribou protection measures will be reviewed periodically in an inclusive fashion will help the regional Inuit associations and NTI be more comfortable with area protection for caribou habitat. And in closing, we hope the NPC will seriously consider the IQ information and other information the KWB has provided as it revises the draft land use plan in preparation for the final hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Lonsdale with QIA. Just as I said in my introduction a few days ago, QIA is in support of protection of caribou in the calving grounds as well as the post-calving grounds. And I spoke in my introduction again on the importance of community involvement and community consultation. So we are pleased that the NPC is considering another consultation step. And although this is still pending commissioner's approval, as well as even funding approvals, since it is pending that, we're, we won't get too excited yet, but we're really rooting for that. And since Warren did mention about like Inuit-owned lands, I guess this whole consultation process is about having communities say within their Inuit-owned lands. QIA is the manager of the subsurface parcels, but we always try to get clear direction from the communities as to what they want permitted on their lands. It's when we're talking in, say, Pangnaptok, and then there's Inuit-owned land outside of Pond. Pangnaptok does not speak to those parcels, and so the closer you are to that parcel, to that community, the better, the more accurate the say is within those lands. And so I guess throughout this whole process, this is just a broad principle of ours where we want the people most affected by these designations to have their say. And so within that Inuit-owned land, it is, still privately owned land, but within the NLCA, it says that the land use plan shall apply to Inuit-owned lands, but with Inuit input. So throughout this process, we'll continue to push for that input, and we look forward to hopefully the continued consultations. Thank you.
NTI. First of all, I would like to thank NPC for organizing this fourth technical session. I can appreciate the pressure that everyone around the table is under as we work through these complex issues, trying to protect or trying to strike a balance between wildlife protection and potential economic development, not only pertaining to caribou protection, but all the topics that we're working through that are being considered for the land use plan. This session has been informative, a little confusing, but nonetheless informative. NTI, along with the regional Inuit associations, will continue to work through this process in our best efforts to provide the best advice for consideration to our leadership. By no means do we want to delay this process unduly. It's been decades in the making. However, we are very pleased that NPC is considering regional consultations, as we feel as we strongly feel the need for community engagement, as we explore how and when Nunavut will grow and develop. NTI and the RIAs are taking the lens of, in the best interest of Inuit rights, goals, and aspirations. And we look forward to the next session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We wrote those closing remarks the day of the blizzard, and I sent this back up my chain of command. Our minister saw those. We've had my government input. Some of this has been read in the ledge already. So what I'm going to read here is not my position only, it's our government. Mr. Chair, GNWT ENR would like to thank the Nunavut Planning Commission for inviting us to participate in this important process of identifying key caribou habitat for protection in Nunavut. Once again, Mr. Chair, we would like to reiterate a few points made during our opening remarks. Many of the barren ground caribou herds in Nunavut are shared with the NWT and are a valued subsistence, spiritual, and cultural resource for people of both territories. Management of these herds needs to be shared, particularly as some of these transboundary herds are in decline or at very low numbers. Mr. Chair, we heard several times during this meeting that caribou are highly vulnerable in the days immediately prior to and during calving and the post-calving period. Disturbance impacts associated with its industrial activities, including exploration, will disrupt caribou calving behavior and negatively, I have a tough time with this word, impact calf production, cow-calf bonding, as well as increased potential for calf and cow mortality. Mr. Chair, maintaining the integrity of the calving grounds is absolutely crucial to the survival and recovery of any barren ground caribou herds, and protection of the calving ground is widely supported by communities throughout Nunavut and the NBT, and also by caribou-using communities in northern Saskatchewan and Manitoba. The GNWT ENR position is that industrial activity of any type, including mineral exploration and production, construction of roads, pipelines, and other infrastructure should not be permitted in calving areas. The GNWT ENR does not support application of mobile protection measure within and around any core calving area of any barren ground caribou herd as described and proposed to this meeting and to a caribou workshop hosted by the Nunavut Wildlife Management Board earlier this winter. These measures, Mr. Chair, will not maintain the integrity of caribou calving habitats. Mobile protection measures are not tested and cannot be relied upon for use in a caribou calving ground. In our opinion, Mr. Chair, this is an unreasonable high risk. The GNWT ENR is willing to continue further discussions on the concept of mobile protection measures yet to be developed and tested for post-calving areas, water crossings, and other seasonal ranges of barren ground caribou herds. Mr. Chair, the GNWT ENR is willing to continue to discuss and explore the concept of a sunset clause. However, we would not support using a sunset clause to automatically remove any established protection of calving grounds at a set time in the future. Mr. Chair, Aboriginal people in the NWT have to face harvest restrictions as a result of the Blue Nose and Bathurst herd caribou declines. Baffin Island harvesters also face similar restrictions, and additional Nunavut communities may also soon be in a similar situation. Here's the thing. There are no greater infringements to Aboriginal rights, and these measures can only be considered for conservation purposes. Decision makers in Nunavut and NWT are being asked to also consider all other options to minimize hardship to Aboriginal people and to make sure that the recovery of all the caribou herds is not jeopardized. Protected areas established through the land use plan to maintain calving ground integrity must be a priority. Finally, Mr. Chair and Madam Co-Chair, GNWT in our hopes that the Nunavut Land Use Planning Process Committee will rise to the challenge of making the right decision for the caribou and the people who depend on it. So good luck with your process, and thank you for having us, Kwana.
Luigi Toretti, Kitikmeot Inuit Association. Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you to the MPC for putting on this difficult workshop. As previously stated, the KIA, the executive direction of the KIA is to examine mobile protection measures. It is not a board direction as yet. We would like to flesh out the idea a lot more, including investigating to develop ideas for mobile protection measures. And in that light, one of the things that I really would like to see is the continued discussions with the GNWT, other parties that can provide input on what management concepts, what potential mitigation concepts can help improve those mobile measures. What I really take home, what I'm going to take home to the Kitikmeot Inuit Association is really the amount that I've learned here. You know, the GN's work on the calving grounds, this was the first time that the level of detailed analyses that went in they're complex, and it's the first time they were clarified to that level for the KIA. So thank you. The other thing that we've learned is in terms of effects and mitigations, and certainly what roads have resulted in the NWT and ecotourism concerns that we weren't really considering. Kavalik Wildlife Board gave me an example of blinds at water crossings, the effects of planes on and photography on directly on the calving grounds. Those are things that the KIA was not really considering in terms of effects. So I appreciate that level of learning. It was something that we weren't never. The flying concept was not something that we thought about. We always use ATVs and skidoos to get everywhere. So we also hear a lot of talk about a first-generation plan. What I'm really looking forward to, as I mentioned before, is really hammering down a time, a date to continue some of these important discussions. And unfortunately, we haven't really gotten there yet. And as the chair usually says, it's between the parties that you have to arrange it. And so I'm here's the olive leaf. Like my people know how to get a hold of me, and the KIA, I should say. Please, let's get these discussions going and get closer to a plan that can be approved. The first generation plan, the NTI and the RAs have worked a lot on process-specific matters. And I think we're really looking forward to the red line version and seeing how the suggestions that we've put forward are incorporated in that. I'm really excited about the potential to look at the Caribou situation on a regional basis rather than holistic, because there are differences between the regions. And you know, so I'll just leave it at that. I think these have been very difficult discussions. I think we need to continue on progressing on these discussions, and I really hope that we can put something forward that won't be ideal for everybody, but will be good enough for everybody.
Earl Evans, BQ Board. Feel free to cut me off whenever you want, David. I know you get a big thrill out of pushing that button. I'd like to thank Bruno there because, like I said, the advantage of speaking later is everything is covered. I think Bruno must have stayed up all night thinking that, so you did a good job, Bruno. Thank you. You covered a lot of points here that we're going to bring up. But this plan is unique in itself. It's a plan that's got to be developed in a place that's new to. There's all kind of new challenges. There's new. The geographic location of this place is unique. I mean, so you can't really. You can use parts of other plans, but they don't really fit this because this country is totally different than down south. So all these things have to be considered, and the plan is gonna have to be adjusted as you go, I think, because there's gonna be different things that are gonna come up that you haven't seen before, because this is gonna be in untested waters, a lot of this stuff. And a lot of plans that were developed down south in earlier projects, they came in with a real subtle approach. They come to the communities, they're gonna do this, and then all of a sudden, 40 years later, take the Peace Athabasca Delta, total devastation. People's way of life totally destroyed. They can't even use the land. They can't use the water. The water is polluted. The snow is polluted. They can go out to their trap lines, they got to pack water with them because there's no water. There's a creek running at their door, but they can't use it. You know, there's people, the landscape is still there, but it's totally useless to the people. So this is what we've got to look at. We have to look at the big picture here. It's just not a matter of rerouting a road around some Caribou or something. You got to look at the big picture, what's going to happen later. And it has far-reaching effects. That Peace River Delta is 800 kilometers from where we hunt geese in the Delta, Great Slave Lake. That delta's dried up because of those two projects. Where we used to hunt geese with waders on, you could walk there with running shoes and you won't even get wet. You know? And this is only 40 years. So we have to look at the real big picture here. What's going to happen here? And in order for a plan to go ahead and be effective, you have to have compliance. And with compliance, you have to have enforcement. You've got to have the capacity to do that enforcement. And it's got to be goodwill on both sides, both parties. They've got to be able to work together. And if if the people on the project see something that shouldn't be there, it's up to the person, the project head, to bring that to the attention of the enforcement division and let them know. There's got to be a good working relationship for this plan to work. And like I said, it's challenging. I mean, where can you put a road in Nunavut right now where caribou aren't going to cross it? You can't. It's totally freaking impossible to do. Caribou go all over the place. You know, they got no real, they have some main migratory routes, sure. But they don't, one day they might not go somewhere for 40 years. All of a sudden, there's a whole herd there and they'll stay there all winter, like what's happening now, you know? So you got to really, really take a good look at how this plan is going to work, and there's got to be room for adjustment. You got to be able to adjust this thing as you go. As you see different problems come up, you have to make the adjustments here to mitigate those problems. So it's a tough situation, and it's going to be challenging. And I can see, like, for a lot of the communities, like when I walk down this street here, this is like Edmonton compared to where I am. We don't even have a damn Tim Hortons. You guys got 3, you know. So, and then you go to Kugluktuk, where Lisa's from. There, holy man, it's like that town is pitiful. So we have the have and the have-nots here, you know. Not because, that's why you're so ornery. No, but I mean, you can see the differences in the communities. You know, all the communities need some economic boost for sure. So that's got to be balanced out throughout Nunavut. And sure, there's parcels of land, Inuit-owned land, but in order to get to that Inuit-owned land, you're going to have to disturb other land that isn't. So everything is affected. You know, it's not just, you know, taking resources out of that one place. You're affecting the whole region as you do it, getting the product to and from market or whatever. But, you know, there's so many. I can go on until he hits a button again, but I mean, it's really a tough situation for everybody to be in, and it's challenging. And the only way it's going to work is if everybody works together and try to come out with some kind of solution to how best to promote the growth for all the people in Nunavut, not just some. Like, everybody has to benefit from this. I mean, the harvesters, they're the most important people in Nunavut. They live off the land. This is their life, you know. And if you destroy this way of life 50 years from now, you know, there won't be anybody out on the land. That way of life will be gone, just like the way it is gone in Fort Chipland. And you'd never think it would happen, but it happens. I passed through there last week, 30 trapper cabins I knew of, not one trapper out there, nobody living there. We don't want that to happen to this place. This is the last frontier on earth, right here in Nunavut. There's no other place like this on earth, you know. So you gotta take care of the animals here, take care of the land, take care of the resources, and don't take everything out at once, you know. Like they say, how much is enough? How much do the people need? You know, so got to be reasonable about it and try to do the best we can here. I mean, right now as we speak, the caribou herd here, the Kamanariak herd, is taking a severe beating at Dooley Lake. There's over 1,000 animals came out of there last week. There's trucks going in there with trailers, guys bringing out a few hundred caribou at a time. Those caribou were there all winter by Dooley Lake. The people at Dooley Lake, they took just what they needed.
Earl, I'm gonna have to ask you to wrap it up.
Okay.
Sorry.
But the minute that road went in there, the skidoos, the trucks, everybody started harvesting that resource. So these are some of the kind of things you got to look at and have some kind of controls. But like I said, I could go on forever. But thank you, David.
No pressure, Brandon.
Yeah, no problem. Brandon LaForest, WWF Canada. Try to follow Earl. I'd like to start my comments by acknowledging the GN biologists. Your contributions have been very helpful and very clear. And I understand the position of your government has changed, but I appreciate your communication that the biology has not. And I was hesitant last Thursday how GN would contribute to this meeting, and I think you guys have done a great job, so thank you very much. We support protected area status for calving grounds, post-calving grounds, freshwater crossings, as well as seasonal protection from ice breaking for the sea ice crossings. We argue that mobile protection measures are unproven and conceptual, and we shouldn't be experimenting with these measures on calving grounds. Further, Given the lack of examples of mobile protection measures on calving grounds, in reference to the Government of Canada's point on the need for clarity when listing prohibitions, we would argue that imposing unproven mobile protection measures does not offer clarity to proponents when interpreting a land use plan. We've heard that there currently isn't capacity from the governments to pay for or monitor the enforcement of these measures. And the suggestion that proponents cover all of the costs themselves and monitor themselves is troublesome or unrealistic, either one. We strongly support, as Sharon mentioned, a full review of the plan after 5 years, highlighting caribou habitat especially, to try and address the concerns that calving ground and post-calving ground protection will unduly impact or delay development. This has been a really detailed and fruitful conversation for an area that represents 6% of Nunavut. I want to reiterate what we said in our submissions and our opening comments, that we aren't advocating for locking away the land and throwing away the key. It's a living document, and we believe it's already a fair compromise given the conservative nature of the GN-identified caribou polygons, the population status of bare ground caribou herds in Nunavut, and the unproven nature of mobile protection measures at this point, which can be developed and reassessed in 5 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie Price, Kikitalik Wildlife Board. I remember at the end, or during the last technical meeting in Rankin Inlet, the chair had asked many of the participants if they felt it was fruitful to have a face-to-face caribou workshop. And many of us, including myself, said yes. We said that it'd be good to have people around the same table being completely honest with their stance and having to look each other in the eye. I don't get to say this much, but it turns out I was right. This has been a hugely fruitful, rewarding, and to borrow Hannah's word, at time confusing meeting. But good on us for doing it. I appreciate that a lot of we may not have final conclusions, but I do believe there's a larger spirit of understanding and willingness to work together as a result of this meeting. So I think that's a great thing. So great meeting. Thank you, everyone. Speaking on behalf of QWB and as a staff person, I work with 14 separate boards. The 13 HTOs of this region and the Kikitalik Wildlife Board itself. It can be a lot of work. Discussions on honoraria alone can be a little bit energetic and require patience. But that's the nature of a regional wildlife organization. And even though I joke about some of the challenges, perhaps the greatest part of my job and the organization I work with is that when it comes time to talking about caribou, it's the most engaging and life-affirming conversation you can have. What's consistent across the 14 boards when talking about caribou is the reminder that caribou have never harmed people. They've done the opposite. They've been an important life source. And they bring joy, like they physically bring joy to people. And as QWB works to develop their own proposals for future meetings, and as we work to develop maps and the technical requirements needed for this process, we do so with the knowledge that caribou have never hurt us. They've always given us life. And there's some solace, there's some comfort in that. So when in the next steps, when we come forward and bring forward our recommendations, that includes prohibition on lands and areas. Like I said earlier, we'll be completely unapologetic on that, and for good reason. But we know things change, and we know circumstances change, so there's also a willingness for flexibility and an openness to work together. And I was really touched yesterday when we had many of the Elder Advisor Committee come up and talk about the need to work together to find solutions, and their willingness to share their frustration within a wildlife management context, but then to share their willingness to work with biologists, with government, willingness to jab at times, but willingness to complement. So it's a complicated relationship, and that's okay. And the last point I want to say is that although I made it sound like Inuit communities are around the same common goal of caribou, at least the group I work with, there's a common theme. In no way do I want to represent Inuit communities in this region as being the same. We have a lot of major issues that we need to work out internally. Focusing on caribou, and although not discussed at length here, Baffin Island communities rely a lot on Kivalliq caribou. And that discussion alone highlights the tension that exists between having access to caribou, but also Inuit right to sell meat within the territory and to other Inuit. That's a huge, complicated issue that Inuit are working on now, including different regions. So I don't want to leave this meeting making you think like, oh, well, we all agree and it's all wonderful and stuff like that. We're working through these hard issues as well. So when we talk about wildlife management and economic development, we understand that tension deeply. So we're trying to figure it out too. Thank you.
Carla Letta with the Nunavut Wildlife Management Board. I would just like to thank the Planning Commission for hosting this technical meeting. It's been very informative, and we hope that it helps the Commission with the revisions to the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan. I'll keep our closing remarks short. I just want to say that the NWMB is not against industrial development. However, the board is of the view that there must be an appropriate balance between development and protection of wildlife and wildlife habitat. Since its clear mandate under Article 5 of the Land Claims Agreement is to secure, to the extent reasonably possible, the conservation of wildlife, the NWMB is committed to helping ensure a responsible balance between development in Nunavut and the protection of caribou and sensitive caribou habitat. We feel it's important to take a precautionary approach and ensure that the Nunavut Land Use Plan takes into account both IQ and scientific information that has been provided to the Commission on the impacts of development on caribou and sensitive caribou habitat, in particular the calving grounds. As we said on Monday, the NWMB is working towards putting together our workshop report and drawing the recommendations from that. And we look forward to forwarding that report and recommendations to the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Hi, Spencer Durainac. This might sound like an Oscar speech, but I'd like to thank a lot of people. First and foremost, the Commission for holding this. I know the logistics alone are not easy, let alone holding these meetings. I want to thank the translators, which are key to allowing us to speak in our language of preference. And I want to thank the technical team for allowing teleconferencing, because it's allowed those who couldn't be with us to participate. I think these are all very important. And I'd like to thank everyone around this table. You know, the depth of discussion this week was great. We got to hear from multiple perspectives, and it certainly did expand my understanding of the issues in the Caribou, and I hope it did the same for the Commission, who will be tasked with trying to capture it all in a reasonable approach. Coming out of here, it appears that there's still lots to do, and lots of discussions to be had, and we're committed to doing that and working with the Commission to try and develop first generation land use plan for Nunavut. Thank you, and safe travels for those who are traveling.
Ken Landa from the Government of Canada. I also would like to say thank you, and in particular, thank you to those who have facilitated us in communicating with each other as well as we have, and we always need to get better at it. It's easy to say we need to find compromises and we need to find balance. It is hard to find compromises, and it is hard to find balance. And these are issues that go right to the heart of who a person is, who a person wants to be, and what a person wants for their children. I see that. I think we all see that. And that's the thought I'm taking away with me to get ready for our next round of discussions on all of these issues. So thank you very much. And I'd like to invite Earl and Jimmy to all my meetings, because laughing helps a lot.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank NPC for organizing this meeting and inviting us. Peter from KRWB. Yeah, Kachangamud Regional Wildlife Board would like prompt and effective steps taken by the management authorities to protect the caribou habitat, calving grounds, and water crossings especially. And I also emphasize that something be done regarding the predation, especially around the calving grounds, as mentioned by Luigi. And also, KRWB will also support the prohibitions of development and mining around calving grounds. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Mitch Campbell, GN. First off, yeah, I would like to just quickly thank the MPC. They've really gone out of their way to try and be inclusive of everyone's comments, and I commend them for that. And I personally know how hard all you guys work, so thank you for that. And also, regardless of the different ideas that might exist around the table, I know my colleagues around this table also understand that we're all in this for the same reason. So there's got to be some common ground here somewhere. We're all trying to do the same thing. So I think we need to try and come together, and I can commit to that. But just generally, well, the GN no longer advocates for the exclusion of industrial development from core calving grounds and key access corridors. Notwithstanding recent shifts in the GN position, I would like to include my professional scientific opinion that includes my understanding and review of peer-reviewed scientific literature, as well as my understanding and review of IQ and traditional knowledge that's been collected and listened to over my 30 years of working with Caribou and consulting with the people that truly understand and rely on them. Briefly, allowing industrial development into calving grounds represents a high risk to the long-term viability of caribou populations. All stakeholders need to understand this reality in order to make effective decisions that will decide the future of our caribou herds. And with that, I'll just hand it over to Amy for a quick finish. Thank you very much.
Amy Robinson, Government in Nunavut. Again, I'd like to thank the NPC and everyone around the table, but especially NPC for hosting this workshop. I know that a lot of work went into it. So as technical level staff, we look forward to relaying the knowledge, requests, and positions shared here to our senior management, as well as our counterparts within other GN departments. We hope to continue to work collaboratively with NPC as well as all planning parties to find balanced land use solutions to this important issue. Thank you.
Here with Executive Director also from NTI. I'm very sorry I couldn't be here because I had other commitments. But one of the employees is here on behalf of us. I understand, we all understand that our government are working in our future. And there are, we have to revise or review whatever is happening. Let us work together, and we know that. And also understand that the communities in Nunavut, especially with anything to do with wildlife and regional wildlife officers, organizations, they have been saying that, that the caribou migration, calving grounds should be protected. This is from our own communities, Inuit communities, and from HDOs in each region. As it stands, we also understand that we have to go forward. There are a lot of unemployment rate in Nunavut, but we have to go forward. That I know. You've heard and being advised that that the exploration will always be with us. The exploration or mining companies will also affect our wildlife because the migration also changes in wildlife. especially Caribou calving grounds. Because the caribou migration or caribou calving ground are always, the caribou always go there to migrate, especially on the same area. Please do not touch the migration area where there is a calving ground. Be cautious because it's very sensitive. You can make you can make a good plan. And our government should make some kind of a plan, and we should work together and go forward on this. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank NPC, the excellent facilitation interpreters, Paul, for your support. Paul is my director, Wildlife and Environment, and the comments he's made to everyone here. I think those are quite bold. And finally, I'd just like to acknowledge my colleagues and how professional they have been. Obviously everyone, but especially my close friend Mitch. I know how difficult it has been for you and all of your staff. And I think you've conducted yourself extremely professionally. Thank you.
Hi, Leslie Wakeland with the BQ Caribou Management Board. It was pointed out to me that if some people aren't really clear why I'm here. I think they know why Earl is here. But the Beverly Common Area Caribou Management Board is very interested in participating in this process because of the transboundary nature of the herds. And there are representatives here from many of the partners for the board, so INAC, GNWT, GN, and the Kavalak Wildlife Board, but there are not representatives here from portions of the Caribou Range in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And so we are here to both put their views forward as well as to take what people say here back to our board. So we have a meeting in May, and we will be telling people what has gone on at this meeting and what people's positions are and the difficulties and challenges. And we will attempt to explain to them why whatever ends up in the management plan is hopefully the core protected areas for calving grounds, why they are so much smaller than the areas that our board has been discussing for 20, 30 years. So it's a two-way information flow as well as just us here telling you what our board thinks. But I won't go through our positions because we did submit comments for the March 4th deadline, so they're on the record. They've been on the website for a while now. But I would like to just say a couple things in addition to reminding you about the shared resource. The board does acknowledge that mineral exploration and mining will continue in Nunavut and wants to work to get the best solution. But the best solution for our board, the bottom line, is really that those activities would occur outside of calving grounds, post-calving areas, and key water crossings. And the board does not believe that mobile protection measures at this point in time are appropriate for any of those areas. But that there is a combination of area protection and other measures needed across the caribou ranges to protect caribou. And we would say, please keep in mind the precautionary approach. That's really important, and assessing the actual risks to caribou over time. And over the long term as well, as Earl pointed out, we have to think big and we have to think long term. So that's the main points, I guess. But I would also like to thank NPC for the opportunity in the organization, the facilitation, the translators in particular, for especially those like me that talk too fast. And also we need to acknowledge the fact that we wouldn't be at this meeting if it weren't for support from WWF, because the board does not have the capacity and the resources to attend these types of meetings. So, yeah, thank you to everyone, and if we will attempt to participate in the rest of the process as much as we can. Thanks.
Thank you, Jimmy Haniliak, Elder Advisor, Kadagnut. Hello, this is my very first technical meeting with NPC, and it's really hard for me to understand most of the stuff, and I'm sort of looking forward to the next one. But I don't know why, but it's really technical, and I just wanted to say a few words. I forgot to mention that I'm going to make it short and sweet, just like me. So, but anyways, I just wanted to say a few things on serious note, sort of. But IQ, traditional knowledge, is very important. And, I think it should be in every meeting in Nunavut, even in the PT. And, you have to use the elders. I'm sure you have elder advisors in your commission, but I don't know, but I advise you to, go into that direction. And most of all, I guess I just want to thank our GN staff for our biologists. And, I still want to, tell Lisa that, find a way to communicate with the caribou from Victoria. And so, when they migrate south, they come back all skinny. Thank you.
I have a short speech to everyone. I'd like to see you, all of you who are concerned with caribou. Whenever there's discussion on caribou, we welcome anyone because it has been a problem in our area as well. For those of you who come into the community station thinking that you will be opposed, it's not the situation all the time. We need help. We need to know. We need to work with researchers, anyone concerned with caribou. We want to understand why the herd is depleting, why it's not coming to my region. So when you come in, I will sit with you. I will inform my community what you are trying to do. I'd like to thank you that you have really assisted me in the last few days, new information that I've never heard of before.
All right, I'll just say one thing. How we deal with this caribou crisis, and I'll call it a crisis, will define us, not just among ourselves, but for all those generations that will follow. It's an enormous responsibility, and I think folks have underscored the complications and the different viewpoints, but in the end, it's all about caribou. So I'll turn it over to Sharon now for final remarks.
Thank you, David. And I thank each of you for your honest participation and giving so much to this session. I always say what our commission mandate is and what we're guided by. We're guided by the NUPA legislation and the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement in its entirety. Our main article is Article 11, but every other article, it all works together, and the commission is very respectful of that. The commission role is not an easy role, and trying to please everyone is next to impossible, but I believe the commission always tries to demonstrate where we can our flexibility within our limited resources and our funding. Our role is to gather data, to listen, to compile, and ensure that everyone's voice is heard in a fair, respectful manner. Stephen, I thank you for your comments especially. It's very difficult for the commission to always get into the communities, and their voice is equally as important, and we can't stress that enough as everyone around the table. And as Warren said, the limited money for participation, and Leslie, that shouldn't be a block that their voice isn't heard or at this table or at the public hearing. I thank you for your commitment to this process. I've been with the commission, I'm going into my 11th year. I can't believe that. It seems like yesterday when we started and had to get 1141A done before we could get the parties back at the table, and here we are today. I would especially like to recognize our elder advisors, David, Jimmy, Liza, Bartholomew. Always wise words and good guidance and good advice. Jimmy's giving me over my lifetime, and I've known him since I've been a young lady, much advice and sometimes pretty funny advice at my stake and my expense. So it's always good to have our elders participate, and I'm grateful for that. David said it for me. I can't say it better, but to the GN Department of Environment, all of you, I'm so proud of you that you kept your professionalism, and in light of everything that happened, I really appreciate that you participated and you came, and from all of us, I think, around the table, thank you so much. I'd like to recognize the commission team. First of all, Annie and Tommy. They're our translators extraordinaire. They're not just translators, they're our mappers, administrators. They play a key part in ensuring good communications. Thank you. To Peter, John, and Jared for putting everything together. They're our workhorses of the planning department with Brian. Always amazing, and they always give 500%. We also have Alana, Sohail, Doreen, all in the back, some of our new staff that just joined our team, and we're grateful that they're now part of the commission staff. Alan, our legal counsel, I can't believe that he was so quiet this meeting at the table. And to David, David and I have a love-hate relationship. He loves to hate because I'm always objective with the commission perspective, and David wants to get it done, and we do too, but it has to be clear and concise. The commitment to this plan, this isn't just for the parties around the table, it's for our future generations. And my family, as well as many around this table, our elders, that's our family, our grandkids. So I encourage each of you, please continue working together, not just at this table. It's our kids, our grandkids that are affected by what we do. And if we don't get this first generation plan right, they will pay the costs of our decision-making today. I know everyone is busy, and we've talked a lot around this table. The next steps are critical, and I ask each of you, please make the time. Please set up the meetings. Please have the conversations. The existing rate issue, that's not for the commission to resolve, it's with you parties to resolve. It's a collective that has to happen. And the commission is striving to ensure that this first generation Nunavut land use plan that the rest of the world is looking at is done in a way is best, including scientific and IQ traditional knowledge that we can. The commission team is small, but we're like bunnies, we never stop. And our doors are always open. We've had a structural change, and we've gone back to the implementation plan direction of having 3 regional offices. We have our office open here in Iqaluit. We still have our office in Cambridge, and Jonathan is heading that office up now. And Brian, his team in Arviat. And even though you may not be in the communities, we're a phone call away. We're always there to support, to work with everyone, including the HTOs, the communities, the wildlife boards. And the more we exchange information, the better we're going to be. So I wish everyone a safe travel home, and I thank you. And it's nice to see so many familiar faces and new friends. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon, and I'll ask